Hello, everyone, and welcome to Win Championship Traits for Life, a show focused on strengthening the mental fitness of athletes, coaches, and anyone and everyone that works with a team on any level. I'm Lee Elias, that's JB Spizzo, and we're joined today by someone who worked in a power position in the NHL for over 20 years, Frank Buonomo. During those 25 years, Frank spent time with 5 different NHL teams and also served as a general manager of the Missouri River Otters of the UHL. And Frank has served in various capacities during his time in the NHL within hockey ops and communications. He has always been active in youth hockey as a volunteer coach, referee, and a AAA board member. He's a graduate of Rutgers University in New Jersey. That'll make all of our New Jersey fans happy. And he earned a degree in sports management and communications. He played 4 years for Rutgers on the hockey team from 91 to 95. Sorry to date you there, Frank. Winning 2 championships. And he's currently the vice president of public affairs for Dollar Bank based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and oversees all communications, government affairs, and foundation, and very important philanthropic-related contributions. Frank, it's a real honor to have you on with us today. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks very much, Lee, and thanks, JB. It's an honor and privilege to be in your presence.
Great to have you, Frank.
Yeah, it goes both ways. We've been told by JB this is going to be an awesome episode. I can tell from the pre-show it's going to be an awesome episode. And all you listening today, be ready for an awesome episode. So, Frank, as we said in your bio, you had a storied career in professional sports. You're on the business circuit now. We know mentorship and developing as a leader is really important to you. So let's start kind of from the beginning, before everything. Tell us about some of the mentors you've had in your life and how they've molded you and helped you with your career.
First and foremost, I think, a lot of times when you're coming up as a young kid and athlete, you have some coaches that really kind of give you the background of, okay, this is not only a sports team reference, this is about life. And, I had a couple coaches do that. Specifically, my college coach at Rutgers really kind of taught us about Mike DeAngelis was his name. And we thought Mike was absolutely insane. But he was a school teacher but just a great human and really cared about his students and really cared about us professionally. Knew we were playing, club college hockey and, but Mike really cared about, us to get us to the next level, not on the hockey side, but just on life side and what we were going to do after that. And that was probably like one of the first, clicks. When you're growing up, you're just kind of, you listen to your coaches, you listen to your parents. And then, when you get ready, I think to kind of make that transition from school to work, you kind of pay attention, then you piece things together, I think throughout your life. That was probably the first one. But somebody I think that really made a huge difference was he's still the general manager of the Nashville Predators, David Poyle. And David is an exceptional person. And I don't even know if he realizes or understands or even I've ever told him the impact that he's had on me professionally. I had worked an internship with the New York Rangers and then spent another 4 years there working in their communications department and, original 6 team, New York City, you think you're on top of the world. And, I take this job to go to Nashville in 1998. And, you think, everything about hockey, you think, everything about, business, you're 28 years old. And I remember my first probably a month and a half there. David brings me into his office and I was like, I'll grab my pen and my paper. Okay, the GM's going to give me things to do. And I sit down and he looks at me and he closes his door. And David rarely ever closed his door. And I was like, first I was like, am I getting fired already? Like, what's happening? And then David said, he's like, listen, he goes, I need you to slow down. He goes, I need you to take a deep breath and really understand where you are and what you're doing. And that really kind of resonated with me throughout my career. And I still remember that conversation like it was yesterday because, David really cared about his employees from the work standpoint, but really truly cared about making you a better person and what your life was like outside of your work and what you were doing from that point. He really wanted to improve you as a person. And I think that is why Nashville has been so successful.
Frank, I love that story. And I love that right away you shared that. It's funny because in my life, again, you'll find this funny, right? I was working at the NHL in 2009. Very good year for you. Within a month, I was coaching hockey in the college level, and I was at the NHL, and within a month, all of it was gone, right? By no fault of my own. Just, it was 2009, we were in recession, everything disappeared. And it forced me to take a break, right? Or to slow down. And the thing is that, and I want to know if you can relate to this, is that for the longest time in my life, and athletes and coaches, this should resonate with you. I felt there was a certain level and a certain speed I had to go at to be successful. And if I didn't go at that speed, I would fail. And it was that was the wrong assumption. Because what happened was when I took a break and I worked on myself a little bit, the grit, it's on my hat, but I meant that. The grit, the desire, the passion was still there. And I was in a better position to manage it, right? It was just kind of like I worked like I played, right? It was just 100% all the time. And I think it's a misnomer that you have to do that. The truth is, if you have a passion for something, you have a belief in something, you'll do it if you have the work ethic. Is that kind of on the right pathway there, or?
I do. I think, both in business and I think in sports, and in my experience in the hockey world, we train to be better athletes, right? We train, we weight train, we hone whatever skills we need to be successful, on the ice or, on the field, on the court. So we're training those things, but very rarely, in years past, I know it's where we're going and it's a good place, but mental training, right? And it's obviously something JB is exceptional at. And I know he's come into some of the teams that I've worked with and trained, players, but you really need to not only on the work side, really for your life, right? And to be to understand, how to be uncomfortable to get comfortable,
right?
And really truly how to be outside that comfort zone, right? Because you're in so many situations in life where you're uncomfortable, and if you could be comfortable being uncomfortable, you eventually get there and you grow. And I think that is so important for young players. I think that is so important for people in their career, and you never stop learning. And I think that's where, when you have a young athlete, we're telling them, well, you got to get on the ice, or you got to go weight train, but nobody's ever telling these young athletes, like, hey, here's the mental skills that you need to put a bad shift behind you, or, something happened in, your daily life that now you got to go play a game that you really need to kind of be able to focus and compartmentalize, that piece of what happened that day and move along. So I do agree with that. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
No,
that's great. And I'm going to just caveat into something there, because Frank, Lee and I were talking yesterday, and there was an article out about how unfit and unhealthy these coaches are. And, we saw it in the NHL, you saw it way more than I did. Some of these, we laughed, but, some of these coaches are a hot dog away from a heart attack. But I remember in Pittsburgh, Danny Bausma, Tony Granato, they took time every day to go to the gym. And I think Rob Brendamore does that now.
Yeah.
Rob Brendamore does that now for Carolina. But I think it's important that, and sometimes if a GM walks in, he doesn't see that coach behind the laptop, breaking down film and after a game, right back on the team plane, right behind the laptop. We had a coach, have a heart attack in the locker room because he was just behind his computer all the time doing that. And I think what happens is leaders can't take time out to look at that. They think, well, if I'm not nugging it out, then I'm going to miss something for success. And we've had military leaders work themselves to exhaustion because of that. And I think you're exactly right. I think now that we're taking some time to understand that the brain is a muscle. It's a big muscle. And just like we work out our arms and our legs and we're doing squats and everything else, if we don't take time to work that muscle out and rest that muscle as well, there's a detriment. What can you caveat on some of those things that you see?
Yeah, I think again too, working with some really good coaches throughout the NHL, there were really good, some really good guys that really took the time. Obviously, it's they're working out, so it's a culture thing, right? And if they set that agenda and that culture, it's no different than somebody in the military or somebody that's a CEO or running a department of a company. It's you have to set the agenda, I think, for your people, and be able to understand where they need their tank filled, right? You fill your own tank, right? So if I got to go work out and I know what makes me mentally fit, physically fit, then I'm able to give that to other people. And I think, and you mentioned Tony Granato, and Tony was someone that, his attitude was one of his best attributes, and just always upbeat, always positive, and really cared. He knew, what players were, whether they were struggling mentally, physically, and was able to grab them, talk to them as a human, not even just about the game, just about life. Right. And now Tony's he's been the coach now for a number of years at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And, like if I had a player that was going to make a decision on whether to go there or somewhere else, I mean, I would choose, the University of Wisconsin tenfold because of Tony Granato, and because, again, like David Poyle and like those type of folks in the game, they really care about you outside of the game, because your career, and I always used to say this to guys too, and, your career is going to end at some point. So, what's the game? Like, what's your end game after you play, right? It's not to go play beer league, which everybody does. I always joke that, like, even at the youth level, listen, like, they're going to do what I do. They're going to go play beer league, whether you played in the NHL or whether you played in, whatever level you played, it ends up there. Right. So from when your career ends to when you get there, like, what are you doing? So I think, again, it's those people that are able to understand it. I'm so happy now that the NHL, the other leagues, and just globally, right? Like, we're understanding how mental health really truly impacts the game, really and truly impacts players. And again, everybody, I walk out my office door here and, how is the mental game? What is somebody going through? And those things are truly, truly important.
I totally agree with you on this, Frank. And it's funny, I'm working with a team right now with a really good coaching staff, but, they're all kind of from the last generation. And I don't mean that in a negative way at all. And like most hockey teams, every year the coaches get older and the players stay pretty much the same age. And one of the conversations we were having was about how, wow, they're just not that vocal, and there's not that guy that stands up, and they, when it comes to adversity, they respond a little differently. And then the conversation started to turn of, well, when I played, or when I was growing up, and I said that, look, guys, we all have our experience. I'm not trying to take away from the hard-nosed experience. I think that there's a lot of value in that, believe it or not. But that's not the experience of these kids anymore, right? And some of them aren't kids. Some of these young men grew up in a position where they might have been given participation trophies their entire lives, or they switch teams every year. And again, I'm not passing judgment right now. I'm just talking reality. So as coaches, it's a mix of both. We have to change our approach on how we speak to these young people, and also we have to coach, right? We have to teach them, right? You can't just go to someone with, well, this is the way I was taught, and expect them to understand that. And diving into what you were saying, right? There's a few sides to this. I've met a lot of people that say, well, I was yelled at and I was kicked to the curb and I turned out all right. And what part of the breaking the stigma behind mental health and mental fitness is helping those people to realize, but you're not all right. You think you're all right? Right? But you're not all right, because this is not the way we're doing this right now. And the truth is this: I think in a great coaching environment and in a great, CEO environment, a great business environment, while there are obviously the applications of this is my job and this is what I have to do as a leader, if you're doing it right, you're actually going to learn from each other, right? And that goes to what you said about caring about your people, right? One of the questions I ask, and JB and I work in the same field here. When I ask, and I'm in an interview with a coach, and I always say it's a two-way interview, I say, yeah, what motivates you and what motivates your players? You know what motivates your players? And I'm shocked how often I get I don't really know how they're motivated. And I go, well, how are you motivating them then? And it's never been asked before, right? So I'd love to get your thoughts on that side of your experience of what do you do to create the connections between you and your people, whether that was in pro hockey, in the space you're in now. How do you approach that? What kind of conversations do you have? And I'm trying to bring this to the audience, right? Here's some actionable things that you can start to do.
Well, I think first, I'll start with my own kids, right? I've got an 18-year-old, first year in college, and I've got a freshman in high school, and I've coached them at various levels or been around, coaches that have coached them, but just in life, right? Have a real conversation with somebody. Right. I don't sugarcoat things. I think there's always a nice way to say something. And I think that's first and foremost, whether you're talking to your kids, you're talking to somebody that works with you, a colleague, somebody that works for you, young players. I think first and foremost, there's always a nice way to say something, right? You can have constructive criticism, And then also, I think if you approach it with empathy, and you're empathetic to people and really try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, that's a leveling factor, right? Like if I can understand who you are as a person and what you're going through, then that's disarming, right? And be vulnerable yourself, right? And be able to laugh at yourself or poke fun at yourself, or really recognize like, hey, I did this wrong or did this right, and share those examples. Like we all make mistakes, young players today is like, just to kind of talk back a little bit, right? Like, so, a player, I don't care at what level, makes a mistake. Everybody in the building knows they just gave away the puck, right? Like, or they didn't chip it out, which caused it, whatever the mistake is. And how many times do we look at from every level of hockey or every level, whether it's youth soccer, it doesn't make a difference what the sport is, right? And you've got this coach yelling at that player, like, and there's the mental game. Like, okay, right, automatically I'm shutting down, or I don't like to be yelled at. Now I turn it off, or now I'm scared to go out and play, right? So now I go out and I'm scared to make a play, or I'm scared to make that phone call for work, or I'm scared to write that report, whatever that is, right? Like, so I think, first of all, like the thing that I always did as a coach was like, I said to the kid, hey, what'd you see? What happened there? Right. And let them tell me like, hey, coach, yeah, I know I should have got that puck and I should have done this with it. And okay, great, man. Like, okay, next time let's do that, right? Like, and I think those are the things and the lessons, right? It's that self-awareness to help people along with, and you have to have that yourself. So, totally. I mean, I just, you get up every day, like, let's have empathy with people, and let's like, it's okay to be vulnerable as well, and yourself.
Totally agree. And JB, I want to jump to, I want to say, Frank, too, it's like that's using failure as a tool to learn versus a tool to oversee, or, and I think that's the disconnect from a lot of coaches of, I have to point it out and I have to do it this way so that they'll learn, and I'll shame them. But the truth is this: the team that learns, the team that uses failure to learn and embraces it will blossom so much faster than the team that doesn't. Right. And again, we talk about this all the time about failure, like not having a fear of failure. Look, failure doesn't feel good. Like I always tell people, you're not supposed to jump up when you fail, but you shouldn't be terrified that, oh, I'm never going to play again, or coach is going to bench me. And I always tell my players or the people I work with, look, you fail 4 or 5 times the same way at the same thing, we have to have a very different conversation than if you just did it once. Right. Because I do expect you to learn from it. Right. You do it 5 times. What are we doing now? But I don't, like you said, shame them. Let's learn about it. Like, I love that you said that. What happened out there? What did you see? What could have you done? What could you have done different? And by the way, this goes everything from running a 2-1-2 trap to my kid spilling his milk in the morning, right? It doesn't matter. It's like, the failure is there. So anyway, JB, I'll throw it to you. I just wanted to comment on that.
No, I just love that. And I was just thinking, I love the coaches hockey coaches that say, yeah, I coached player X. He made it to the NHL. I'm like, that kid was going to the NHL without you, pal. What do you, right. What have you done for everybody else? That's right. Where the success is. What you do for everybody else. Frank, we're going to get into culture, because I think, we talk about culture on this show. Lee's big on it. You're big on it. I'm big on it. It comes from having a foundation of trust, integrity, treating people right. I mean, I can personally attest from the first time I came to work for you at Pittsburgh. I show up, I'm a consultant, car picks me up at the airport. I come to the rink, and, in the coach's room, there's a locker with my name on it, with all sweats, with credentials. I felt like a first round pick, and I was just coming and giving a seminar. But I think it's so important, what you and Ray Shiro did, and you built that culture, and everybody wants it. Everybody wants it. We know culture. Let's do culture, but it escapes most teams and most companies. So just dive into that and the importance of culture and how you get to it.
Yeah, I do remember that, JB. It was funny because I think you were a bit overwhelmed the first time you came to Pittsburgh, and you were like, "Wow, oh my God, this is crazy." Like, I feel like I'm automatically a part of this team, and
yes,
it's
part of the family.
Acceptance, right? It's that's what I'm saying. It's not hard to do that, right? It's just be human, right, and humanize what's happening. Like, listen, you walk out of your work every day, or you walk out of the rink every day. Guess what? Like, the rink's going to be there tomorrow. The work's going to be there tomorrow. It's the human part to what we do and how we do it. And really, I would never ask somebody that works with me in our group here at Dollar Bank, like not to do something that I don't know how to do, or that I didn't spend the time learning, like whether it's a new platform or, again, I'm not a banker by trade, right? So, I go 20 plus years in pro sports and hockey specifically. And now I'm working on the banking side of things. And I'll be honest, I was terrified. I'm like, can I do this? And for the first 6, 8, 10 months, you're drinking from a fire hose, but you're growing every day, right? It's that uncomfortableness. And then I said, okay, what do I want this group? What do I want my group to look like? Like, what do I want us to stand for? And I always say to the folks that work for me or work with me, I always say work with me. I don't say work for me. They work for Dollar Bank. They don't work for Frank Buonomo. Like, we work together. We're colleagues, right? So I think that's one, right? Your culture is like, we work together. Like, I'm not going to ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself. First things, and again, that's players, that's culture, that's coaches, like, understand your people, and make sure that you have their back, right? Make sure you're supporting people. And I think that's the start of that culture, right? And, if you're going to, you have to let people, again, give them the rope to do their job, give them the, if you say, okay, you're a left winger, here's the position that I want you to play, but I want you to be creative within your position and be able to do things and push yourself and to get better. Like, my job here at work is to hopefully, build the next leader or build the next person that's going to step into this job. And I think we have leaders or coaches or players that get scared of that, right? So I think you need to be open, honest, and empathetic to help create that culture, JB. Like, I'm sure that you dealt with military leaders that created that culture, right? When you think of military, and again, I never spent any time in the military, but I've been fortunate enough to talk to people like yourself that have given us some excellent insight. Like, you look at the stereotypical military movie, right? And you've got that drill sergeant, that leader that's just like, just pounding and yelling and screaming. But, just from reading your book and just talking to you throughout the years, like, you've had mentors and people that have created that culture within the military, right? And I know you emulate that and you try to emulate that as well. So
100%. I would not have made it, 26 years in the military without military leaders that have mentored me and like that, like David Poyle did for you, call you and say, okay, hey, listen here, I want to try to chip off some of these rough edges. I just think that, we talk about this culture and everybody wants it. We have great culture. And then we really say, really, do you? Because when you have great culture, people are going to just love to be there. They're going to love to be there. Of course, they need a paycheck. They got to live a life, but they're just going to come there and they're going to grind and they're going to do more because they love it. And, everybody talks about, the Pittsburgh Penguins way, the Patriot way. Sorry, Lee, because Lee's obviously from
you picked
from
the
Philly.
two teams. You had to pick those two. No, I respect all teams.
No,
mostly.
But yeah, that's great. Go ahead. Back to you.
I think it's like the little things, right? The little things you do for your people, the little things you do that matter, right? Like whether it's at work or in a sports team, like you're saying, coming in, your nameplate's there. You have a, you have a tracksuit. You have you just have, a pullover. One of the fun things when I was working, my first job out of college was working for the New York Rangers, as I said before. And, there were players like Messier and Gretzky and Leach and Richter and some of those guys that came. And when I go back and I look at some of those rosters, I'm like, oh my God, like look at these players, like Yari Curry came through and Kevin Lowe. And, but one of the things that Mark Messier used to do is he used to call the train or have the trainer call the guy in our minor league team and say, okay, like so-and-so is getting called up. Hey, can you get me his suit size? And, kids come in to play his first NHL game and Mark would have a tailor in New York get a suit and they'd hang it in his stall with a note. Hey, congratulations on making it to the show or the NHL, whatever, here's a little something from the boys. And they would never make it for him. Right. Like, so automatically, right. That player walks in and, awesome. I'd be terrified. Right. Like, and now all of a sudden there's that disarming factor. Like, wow, like that is something special. Right. Like, so, I'll tell you a funny story. I remember Bill Berg was the player when I was with the Rangers, and it was picture day. So his wife has a baby that morning. He's at the hospital. So one of our trainers calls up and says, hey, Frankie, we need you to come down to the locker room and get dressed in Bill Berg's gear and go out and just stand in the picture. And we're going to impose his, put his face over your face. So like I walk into the NHL, like the room, like I'm terrified. Like I'm like, with the Rangers a couple of years, but like, I'm not going in and dressing with NHL players, right? So I go in and literally, like, you've got Mark Messier, Wayne Gretzky, like Richter, Lee, all these guys, like Hall of Fame guys. And I'm just like terrified, like putting on hockey gear. And I'm like, oh my God. So I go out, we take the picture. And one of the things that they did when I left a couple years later is they got everybody to sign that picture for me, and it's still hanging in my.
Awesome.
I get people to come over and look at it. Wow, you played. And I was like, no, I really didn't.
I did for
but
one.
Again, it's the
day.
culture. It's the culture thing, right? Like of the little things that good leaders do. To really disarm, have empathy, put yourself in other people's shoes, and treat people as they should be treated.
I want to stay on this for a minute because, as JB said, it's something I'm super passionate about. And, it's funny, when I worked at the league, Frank, I've been around Messier multiple times. And what's amazing about Messier is he has this intense look on his face almost all the time. It's like when he's just kind of doing daily stuff, he has that look like he had on faceoffs. Now, when he smiles and stuff at you, totally goes away. But like, he could be drinking a cup of coffee more intense than anyone I've ever seen in my life. But great human being, great leader, obviously. One of the few that could do it by example, vocally, and in every walks of his life. But when it comes to culture, because this is something I want to impress on the audience, right? I love the quote unquote branding nature. Like, again, JB, what they did for you, you had all the Pittsburgh Penguins stuff. You were part of the team. And it's funny because that's one of the more easy things to do to create culture, right? It's just the thought that's there. The thing that I find teams miss, and Frank, I want to get your thoughts on this because I think you're totally going to be an expert on this, right? I know you are. Is that a lot of coaches, a lot of teams go, okay, well, I did that for that guy, right? We did it. Culture is never achieved by doing one thing. It is something that needs to be nurtured every single day. Frank, you said it too. I revere the military. When I want to learn about being a good teammate or a good team, I look to the military. They're the greatest team on the planet. JB is a mentor for me with many ways. You spoke earlier in the show about being comfortable with the uncomfortable. No one does that better than the military, right? So I'm always looking to the military. Military trains every day, all the time to continue to maintain that culture all the time. In corporate America and in sports teams, we might do a team building exercise once or twice. And hey, we did it. And it's completely wrong. The culture is never fully achieved. It has to be maintained. And that's where teams miss it, right? That's where businesses miss it. So I want to hear your thought of how do you maintain that culture? How do you maintain that team bond consistently? Because, hey, life happens, man. Life happens. We talked before the show, we had worked together in the past. My daughter had been born the day before. We were working again. Life happens. I was in a different mindset at that time. You know what I mean? How do you maintain that team bond?
I think you have to be, there's an effort there to do it, right? And you have to be intentional. And I think if you have a plan and you're intentional and you surround yourself with, smarter people than you, people that are going to help you drive that culture. It's all about the people that I think that are around you. Whether you're filling out a coaching staff or whether you're filling out, your team at a business, it's about being intentional and purposeful with what you want to drive and being consistent about that. And I think if you can do those things and impress upon people, like, we can always be better. We can always learn, and we also have to be humble in the way we approach that. And we also have to be humble when you achieve a success, right? I always say, like, we always need to look behind us to pick people up, right? You always have to look behind you. Like, you can't just walk over people and step over people. And that goes back to, like, with David, like, when I sat in that conversation with David Poyle, he's like, this isn't New York and I can't have you. It's not just get to the top, keep going, move it, and I think so when you're creating that culture, I don't want to say you're never satisfied, but you're satisfied with the little wins and you're satisfied with doing the little things that are important to people and that make a difference in people's lives, right? Not only from a work standpoint, but from a personal standpoint. And I think, you've got these goals that you need to achieve. But again, you'll get there. It's more important for me to bring people along during this journey than rush to that goal. And I think that's part of the process. And I think if you can be intentional, and you can be humble while you're doing that, that's how you continue to create culture. And again, I don't know if you guys have seen, I'm sure you have, like, I watched those clips that the Carolina Hurricanes put out on Rod Brindamore, like in the locker room, right?
Yeah.
And you can just tell that everybody is on board there. And you can just tell from his energy and the demeanor and what he brings in that room. Like, you don't have to be an expert on culture, or you don't have to be around a team, but you are looking in that going, I want to play for that guy. I want to run with that guy. I want to hang out with that guy, because he's bringing it each and every night. And I think he is really, you look at him and you're like, wow, that's a guy I want to emulate, both personally and professionally.
Absolutely. And, he's always been like, I remember, like, again, grew up in Philadelphia, right? So I had the really privilege to watch him play for the Flyers before we moved him, and which was devastating. It went to Carolina, ended up winning a cup there. But yeah, Rod Brindamore, for those of you listening that might not be hockey fans, make sure you look him up. He really is a shining star in pro sports, of someone who does it right. At least in my opinion. Frank, sounds like in your opinion too. From every stance. And it's a great answer, man. Like, again, so often in life, Frank, we as leaders are only focused on the goal. And even in the extreme cases have that guy, you said it, that guy fell down, we got to keep going. You got to give yourself permission to both, and this is another thing I think people miss, both pick those people up, but also to celebrate the little wins. Hey, Bob and Wendy had a kid. Let's celebrate that. That's a wonderful life achievement, right? It's not going to keep you from hitting your goal. Right. In fact, it's going to help you to let them know that you care. Right. You talk about motivation. I always talk with teams about, I want maximum performance. And you're not going to get maximum performance if they're not mentally there. It's not possible. Right. And that's a big part of it. And JB, again, throwing it to you, in the military, and we always talk about the similarities of the team aspect between the military and sports. Right. But the words are different. We say this all the time. Sacrifice in hockey is jumping in front of a puck. Sacrifice in the military is a totally different avenue. All right. So JB, I always love your thoughts on this too. Frank, if you don't mind, about this stuff, because you guys have to be brothers and sisters under the biggest pressure there is, right? Knowing what could happen. How do you do that? Is it just constant training? Is it unsaid? It just happens through the bonds of your training. How does that happen in the military?
Well, I think what happens is you put yourself in situations where you all have to give way together. I think that was Mark Messier's big term there when they won the Stanley Cup with the Rangers. It was like heave ho or something like that was like the motto, right? And it was all this give way together. And I think another part of that is obviously putting your ego at the door, and it's doing whatever you can to be successful. Frank, fortunately, invited me to, I was in Afghanistan a whole year, and I got back, and next thing you know, I get a call and he's like, be on a plane tomorrow to Detroit. And I was there for Game 7 in 2009 for the Stanley Cup, which was amazing. And, we talk about, being a role player. Look at, Max Talbot there, right? Here's a role player that, I think he scored 2 goals that game, I think, right, Frank? Something like that.
Wonderful.
So but bringing it all together. And I think when you do and you establish that and you establish right culture, like people want to go to special operations units in the military because they have this very great culture. It's hard. You got to work, extremely difficult work you have to do, but people do it. Right. People do it because the culture's there. And I think that's why people rise when they have the ability to rise to professional ranks, because its culture's there. Now, not all people like it when they're doing it. There's people that play in pro sports that don't really like it, but they can't do anything else. Okay. But when you get there and you put that culture together, and now we're talking about Max Talbot a little bit, and obviously, Sidney Crosby. You've had Sid since since he was drafted, and I say it all the time what a great human being is on and off the ice. But maybe you can expand to the audience. So, what makes him such a wonderful human being?
Ooh, that's a good one, and I could elaborate that. I just want to quickly go back 1 second and say, back to what you were saying, JB, like, everybody's got a role, right? Like, everybody's got a role to play. And it's about, part of that culture is understanding what people's contributions are, whether you're, a fourth line grinder, you're top scorer on a team. I think, or whether, you have a niche in a business, and, everybody's got a role, and you need to respect that and welcome that and listen to people. I think that's another thing too, is a lot of people listen to respond, not listen to hear and understand. And I think that is so important, overall, checking your ego at the door and those things. And the other point I wanted to make too is I don't know about you guys, and I'll get back to Sidney in a second, but it drives me crazy. Like, and again, I wasn't in the military, but again, talking to you, JB, and talking to and listening to some of the stories over the years, like it's funny to me, but also annoys me when people make the comparison of like, athletes going to war and, oh, it was a war tonight, or we were in a war zone. You were not in a war zone, man. Like, nobody's shooting at you. Right. You're not running for your life. I mean, I get some of the comparisons, but I always try to stay away from that. Or, when I knew guys were doing interviews, I would try to guide them away from that, because, you're getting back in your car and you're going for dinner and you're going home to your family. Like, right. You're not spending another 2 years in a foreign land where, you're fighting for your life. So anyway, I just wanted to say that.
I used to love the players who are in the buffet line after the game. They're like, it was a war tonight. Like, oh, yeah.
I know, guys.
How's the chicken parm? Pretty good, isn't it?
Exactly.
Man, a war out there.
I was eating dirt in Afghanistan, right? Like, yeah, right. I wasn't eating chicken parm.
These MREs are a lot better than the buffet. Frank, just before you dive onto that, one of the things I do say is that it's okay for athletes to use military as an anchor, right? As an anchor. And I've always said that, like you're saying, guys, oh, there's a war tonight. I said, switch your thinking that there are people actually in a war tonight. Right. And you played hard because you know that they're doing that.
Right.
How hard is it for us to play a hockey game, football game, baseball, whatever, when they're doing that? So, if you can, I don't mean you, but like just for the people listening, use it as an anchor. It's a great anchor, and it's true. Right. There are people fighting for your freedom right now, so you can play the sport you're playing. Right. If you can't come together under that, then what are we doing? Right. And again, I think the person you're going to talk about knows that too.
Oh, no doubt. And to just quickly build on that point too, it's like, again, like we need to really just be empathetic with everyone, right? Like we're in such a volatile state right now in our world where, like if we could just dial it back a second and realize everybody's human, everyone needs help, and be able to do that. And it's not just about you every day, right? There are people struggling each and every day, right? And you need to put that in perspective. Like, through this pandemic and before, one of the things here at Dollar Bank specifically, like what I like about my job here is we're able to be out in the community, right? And we're the largest community bank in the country, right? So, and within our markets that we serve, like it's important to make sure that we're, education and access and being able to provide and bring people along. I think that's part of, the team and the culture and those type things. And, to switch gears back to the sports part of it, like, you take a guy like Sidney Crosby and just to watch him, I spent the first 6 years with him of his career with the Penguins, and to watch him, even at a young age, just be just so purposeful in what he does, how he trains, but really how he treats people. It's really simple, as I think a pro athlete, or especially a guy of that stature, to dismiss things or dismiss people, or just not, think about, things or the way they impact people. He would call me at night sometimes and just be like, hey, I've got this to do. Hey, what if we did this for these guys? Or what if we did this for this group? Both, on the community side of it and the charitable side, but then also with his teammates. He would do things like, we were in Montreal one time, and I know I've told JB this story. I was milling around the lobby before the team bus to go over to practice, the morning skate in the morning. And, there was a mom and dad and a young girl, and she was in a wheelchair, and she had a Sidney Crosby jersey on. And typically, at the hotels we were staying at, we were obviously privileged to stay at some really, really nice spots. And, you don't really have fans walking around the hotel, excuse me, in jerseys and whatever. And so I just shot him a text and said, hey, I said, there's a young girl down here in a wheelchair. I said, you may want to just stop and say hi. And, I've got a Sharpie on me. We can sign some autographs and talk there. And he said, hey, no problem, Frank. They're my guests here. Okay. So here's a young guy, usually like in that position. I knew, you're doing, hey, Frank, can you do this? Or can you do that for this guy? Or can you do this for me? But he flew them in. He got a hotel room for him at our hotel. And so he comes down in the morning, and he sat for about 25 minutes with them, had breakfast, chatted with them, and then brought me over, introduced me to them so we can get him into the morning skate. And like, those are the things when we're talking about culture and talking about creating, and, as a young player and a young leader, like all of your teammates are watching that, right? So they're learning that, like, wow, okay, like, and he was the most superstitious human being I've ever met in my life. And, like, so his day was so regimented that, but that was more important than him, right? That was more important than who he was as a player or getting ready for a game, but whatever that morning routine was for him, to have empathy, to make sure that he did that. And that's one example. Like he did that, every day, every week. Like there were things like that happened all the time. And I think, that's the type of people, that's why people, I think, gravitate to those type of players and people.
I don't want to gloss over the last thing you just said. And I was thinking that while you were talking about this, it's not the first time I've heard a story of Sidney Crosby doing something like that. Right. And that's really part of the key, right? This is something they do all the time. It's not just something they do once in a while to feel better about themselves. And like, that's one of the characteristics of these people is that, and you said too, Frank, I love this. And athletes, coaches can learn from this. He didn't go over there and say hi and sign the autograph. He spent quality time with these people. And again, I've heard that story about Crosby spending 20, 30, 40 minutes with people to talk with them because he understands. Another athlete that did that, Gordie Howe, right? Wayne Gretzky. You hear these stories when possible. Obviously, not always possible with the daily life, but they spend time with people, quality time. They understand that, this is important. This is an important part of who I am and what I do, and it's important to them. So I love that, and it just kind of brings me up to this next point, Frank, and you've been around some incredibly heroic, maybe that's not the right, just legendary athletes. I'll put it that way, right? In the eyes of a lot of people. One of the questions I love to ask is, what are the 3 to 5 commonalities between these high performing superstars? Because a lot of times I ask that question to younger people and they say, well, Crosby's got a great backhand and this guy was a great leader and, this skill set. And I find it has nothing to do with skill sets. The skill's there, right? The skill's obviously there. But what separates the top people that you've met from maybe, underachievers, right? Because I bet you it has nothing to do with skill.
I think, if you look at whether it's, somebody that's been successful in business, right? Or you look at somebody that's been successful in sports, I think first and foremost, they're driven, right? They have a goal, they have a purpose. Like they get up every day, and they know what they want to achieve. And again, that's hard to do, right? Especially as a young athlete. And it's not like you have to set these long-term goals. Hey, what am I going to get done today? Hey, I know I want to work out, or I know I got that math homework, or I know I've got I've got practice tonight. I really want to work on this drill, or I really want to do this, or, hey, I've got to sit for 20 minutes myself and just think about it and just visualize it. Or I have to make sure that I talk to, my therapist or my mental health coach. Like those are the things, again, there's a purpose and they're driven, right? They conduct themselves the right way and they treat people the right way. And that's, I think another quality of we go back to empathy and treating people the right way, and everybody's got a story and understanding that. I think listening to learn, not listening to respond. Guys that I've come in contact with, or players, or even some people that I've learned from in the business world, you can truly see when somebody's looking at you to understand and comprehend what you're saying, and not just listening to answer. And again, I had to learn that skill. I was awful at it when I was younger. Like you'd be like, okay, great. And I'm not paying attention to you, but my right. Wheels are spinning and blah, here's what I have to say, because I want you to hear me. So I think that the folks that, again, in the business and in sports world, they listen to understand and listen to learn. And the other thing is to ask questions, right? And be vulnerable to say that I don't understand this. Please explain it to me again. Or, teach me this, or, hey, I noticed this, or you said this at a meeting. Like for the first probably good year, I mean, it's still happened to me now in this business where, I'll sit in a meeting and somebody will use an abbreviation for something in the banking world. And I'll be like, okay, great. Let me jot that down and Google when I go back to my office, or, right. Oh, okay, that's what that is. I got it. Right. So those are probably some of the qualities I think that of people that I've had the honor to come in contact with that I've picked up some of those traits. Hopefully, listen, I have my share of of deficiencies, I'm sure, in things that I do, but I think you're always learning, and I think that again, those folks are always learning in their lives and learning and trying to understand. And I think it's so. Again, we're at a crazy point in our world right now where, it's really, really so important to reach out to people and to reach across, the street and pick somebody up, or behind you and pick people up. So those are some of the qualities anyway that people that I've been in touch with.
I wrote down a bunch of things that you said today, but I circled about 3 times. I think it's so important. You said the word purposeful. And I think that's even more than driven and everything else. But, purposeful, you're purposeful about what you do. Crosby's purposeful about what he does daily. And I think if people take that away, let's have a purpose to today. And this is what it's going to be. I think that's so important because we work well in a regimented system. I just want to circle back a little bit about, there's a lot of young people that are growing up playing this game, a lot of young coaches, and they can't find their way into the game. They can't find their way. They're not a player. Obviously they're a player. That's one thing, but they can't find their way in. We have such a old school, even parochial system that we don't, well, you didn't grow up here. You didn't do this. You're not from Regina, Saskatchewan. So forget it. And one of the things, Frank, you and I talked about is what, we felt that the Golden Knights did well is when they just hired great people. They didn't care if they had a hockey background. So how do we do this? How do we get people into sports, make it more diverse? And I love the crossover. You were in sports and then went to banking. You're like, I was scared to death. I was drinking from a fire hose, but you did it. A lot of people wouldn't have done it. They would just, take another consulting gig or another gig, and you know how it works. And they just keep recycling these folks. And there's a lot of great young coaches, great young executives out there that want to be in this game. And we have to change it. How do we do it?
I think first, as you said, like there's an old school mentality to sports, right? There's an old school mentality to some certain industries around our country and in our world, right? And I think that's changing, right? Like the younger generations have so much to offer. And I think it's about having people opening up their mind. Like we need to be more diverse in everything that we do. We need to think outside the box. And I say outside the box, like, because I'm talking traditional thinking of what we think a coach or a player or an executive or somebody entry level is. And, I've got a good friend of mine, guy's name is Jeff Longo, and he and a colleague, Patrick Stack, started this sports biz camps, right? And it was specifically designed for high school students, right? And for them, it was they were both professors and teachers in college, and they noticed the deficiencies that some of the high school students were coming in with as it related to, hey, I want to be in sports, I want to be a GM, or I want to be a coach, or hey, I want to be in this field, but here's the limited knowledge. And so it was really expanded. Like I think we really need to look at how we help provide access, right? Not only in sports, right? And we can make that sports reference in a second, but in life, like how do we help young people? If somebody has a learning disability or somebody is, has some issues, it's like, instead of discarding them, how do we bring them into the fold? I remember I had a teacher in high school, I won't say their name, that I wasn't a great student early on in high school. And I didn't do well in this class. And he actually told me to come in and put my head down and sleep and don't disrupt the class and don't ask questions. Like, and to me, like years later, that resonates, right? Like, what happens if a kid's struggling, or what happens? Like, we got to stop being worried about numbers, and we got to like just really teach people to provide that, right? And you look at the way we've gone through our careers. We played the game. We have context within the game, right? What about those people that are intelligent, that have been out there, that don't have any access to somebody in the sports business, or don't have access to anybody in, say, even banking or whatever industry you're going into, how do we reach out and bring those people along, right? For first and foremost. But it's also looking at people, like I had a toughest time transitioning from the hockey world to the business world, because people couldn't see my skill set outside of that sports world. And I think we have to look across different industries and across different scopes of, what can this person bring? If I look and there's 10 people that we're going to hire or look to hire to fill a position, I'm looking at those people that, okay, what have they done outside of work, right? Do they have the general skills to get this job done, right? But it's about giving people opportunity and seeing them outside of what's on a piece of paper, right? And it's talking to people and informing yourself of what they can do. And I ask people that work with me or people that I interview, what are your goals? Like, what do you want out of this position? Where do you want to go? Because this may not be the position you want right now, but this is going to get you to that next level. And we have to have leaders that are willing to get people to the next level, to see them outside of, what's in front of them. And I give our CEO here credit, because when I interviewed with him, I think he understood my skill set. He understood with what we needed here at Dollar Bank. And he saw me outside of somebody that was a typical banker, right? So if we can see people outside of what we're putting them in, like whether you look at somebody and you make a snap judgment on them, like we need to open our minds and look at people and say, wow, this person really could probably be here. I hired somebody on my staff that was in another department and had no PR communication experience, but I looked at that person and said, wow, like they have so much more to give and so much more. And we are a better department and I'm better because that person's on our staff. And I think, we have to stop looking at it and say like, wow, like I'm so worried about me and how I look. Like they only make me look better. You hire an assistant coach that helps your power play, you only look better. You hire somebody, a military leader promotes somebody in the military, and now they look better. So you guys know what I'm saying. I know it's kind of long-winded, but we have to stop being scared of and let our guard down to open up possibilities for everybody.
And JB, you know this too. I volunteer to host another show about military members transitioning out of the military, and it's a similar conversation, right, JB? Of you get out of a 25-year career in the military, you have all these skill sets, but you might even not even know how to communicate that to an employer, and then there's a stigma there. So yeah, and this goes back to what you were saying earlier, Frank, about knowing the person, right? It's not just about their resume; it's knowing the person. I love that you ask, where do you want to be? Right? Like as a leader, don't you want to know that? Don't you want to know where these people want to be? And again, look, to be fair, you could equate this right to sports. You could equate it right to sports. I'm not trying to bring it back, but it's like, on any team, where do you want to be on this team? What position? You might not be there today, but maybe we can get you there, or maybe we have to have a conversation about that. JB, I did cut you off by accident. Go ahead, please.
No, I was just saying that it's great that, you had a CEO at Dollar Bank that has a vision and doesn't say, this is exactly what I need to fill. No, I need the best and the brightest. We had Doug Sifu on, the co-owner of the Florida Panthers, and, Virtu Financial. And he said, they don't hire any traders. They hire no traders. They don't hire anybody off of Wall Street. They hire people out of college or from different fields. They obviously hire very bright folks that can do what they need to do, but they purposely did not want to go with somebody that maybe had that experience that brought that to them. They wanted something different. And I think when we do, when the NHL does open up and the NFL and all these sports teams, it's starting to go a little bit more diverse. And sometimes I think they do it just to say, look, we've done it, instead of saying, let's open it. Let's really do it. I mean, Kevin Weeks should be the commissioner of the NHL. Like, and there's a reason for that, with experience and everything else that people bring. And when we do this, we're better for it. And I give the Vegas Golden Knights a lot of credit for that, for just saying, this person wasn't in sports, or this person was in basketball. let's bring that in to do that. And so if you're a leader out there and you're running a business, open your mindset, throw away the standard resume. Everybody you bring in is probably qualified, and you're exactly right. And people think differently now. These young people, they think different. The world's flat for them. They grew up with the iPhone. The world's flat. They grew up with the internet. They think differently. Use that to make yourself successful. Thank you for that, Frank.
And I think it's about giving people a voice, right? Like, I have you on our staff, or we're on this staff together. I want to hear what you have to say. Like, my way isn't always the right way of doing things. And I think coaches, leaders, et cetera, like, you have to understand that these people, you hired them for a purpose, right? Or you're going out and asking somebody's opinion I like to ask questions. I enjoy asking questions to people because it's knowledge. And then you get a barometer of, okay, where are they at? How can they help me? How can I help them? And, again, give people a voice to be heard, and give people a voice to help them along their journey, right? Like, it's a journey, and everybody's journey is different. Like, just because you got a kid or a player or a person that's at this stage of their life, and you've got somebody up here, stop comparing yourself to this person that's here, right? Like, you'll get there. It's your journey. It's your life. So, how can we help people along their journey, whatever it is, like a young player or a young, somebody on a staff or somebody that's been in business for a long time? Like, how can we help get them to the next level? Or it's just about caring for people in general.
Absolutely. And you said it earlier in the episode, Frank, surrounding yourself with good people, right? You have to know where your gaps are. You have to know what you're not good at or where you don't excel at. Find the people that do and build trust, right? And go on that journey together. I was just talking to somebody the other day. No one successful does it alone. No one. It's never happened. All right? From Genghis Khan to whoever, they didn't do it alone. Before our last question, because we got to wrap this up, I just wanted to reiterate from your answer earlier. I asked you, what were those 4 or 5 things that the great ones share, right? And as predicted, wasn't about skill. I wrote these down. I just want to read it to the audience. If you're a young coach, a young athlete, the question I want you to ask yourself with these is, are you practicing these now? And if not, what can you do to begin practicing them? Number 1, drive and purpose. Most athletes don't have an issue with that one, but you never know. Next one, listen to learn. To learn, right? Not to be the next one. Do not just be the person waiting for your turn to speak. Listen to learn. That's one I've had to work at very hard in my life. I can be vulnerable with that. Haven't always been good with that. If you're looking to get married, that's one you're going to want to learn. The next one also was a yearn to learn, or Frank, you just kind of said it too. Curiosity, right? The great athletes always are looking for more ways to learn. Great business people, anything. And then the last one you didn't say in that answer, but you said it throughout the episode, is empathy, right? Which really is kind of the word of the decade right now. We lack it. We need more of it. The people, I'm saying this to everyone listening, the people who learn empathy and can apply it are going to be the leaders of the next generation. You will be the leader, right? And I'm going to say this to Frank and JB, and I think you'll agree with me. We need leaders right now. We have a serious lack of leadership right now and have for about a decade. All right. That's nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with anything other than we are lacking leadership in this country, probably globally right now. All right, Frank, last question for you. I've been fortunate enough in the game. And so have you, there's been moments of the great growth in the game, right? Mid-90s saw great growth in the game. Post-lockout, we saw some growth in the game. 2 people Ryan Whitney and Paul Bissonnette, from Spit and Chicklets, and they've grown their personal brands and in a way the sport. They bring a lot of attention to the sport. Biz is now a major person on TNT, sit next to Gretzky, which is amazing. I want to know not so much about how awesome that is, but tell me the type of people they are. Because here's the thing, they're kind of looked at in a silly way a lot of times, but the truth is these are hardworking guys, right? That they have a purpose. They want to learn, right? They do in the Frank Buonomo 4-step path to success. Tell me about those guys real quick.
Great guys. And it's funny because I think sometimes, you look, it's judging a book by its cover, right? You look at Paul Bissonnette and everybody thinks, okay, he's just going to fight his way through this. And he wasn't a good player, but we all know that any player that plays in the National Hockey League is a pretty good player.
Very good.
And they can play. And,
Right.
they may poke fun at themselves and be, find that humility in what they're doing. Ryan Whitney was a good player. Ryan Whitney played a long time in the National Hockey League. And, and both of those guys, it's funny. I think I've told JB the story. There was the one year, Paul Bissonnette got called up. I want to say a good 10, 12 times, right, up and down to our minor league team. And he really appreciated being there, knew that whatever his role was, he was going to do it, right? Like he always used to call himself the highest paid DJ in the NHL, like joking around, right? And when he got into a game and, he worked hard, right? Like after a morning skate or at practice, last guy off the ice. And, he would always, like, when he got sent back down and I'd have to go tell him, hey, here's your car, here's your flight or whatever, he'd shake my hand and have like cash in it, like I was the concierge or, like he was tipping me. And I'm like, Bess, dude, you don't have to do, Frank, you do so much for me. Or you just appreciative people, right? Like the same thing with Witter, just appreciative. And, they got it at I think, in their career where when social media started to explode, they knew that was a vehicle to connect with fans and connect with people. Right. And they did that. And they knew doing that appearance or going to see that kid or going to that hospital made a difference. Right. And so I am not shocked that they've had the success they've had because of the way they've treated people along the way. Right. And like you're talking about growth, right. And you're talking about growth of this game. And I think, for the NHL to continue to grow, it has to grow in a diverse market, and it has to grow and provide access to young kids that would never play the game or would never even think about playing hockey. If we think about sports, like how easy is it to go to a schoolyard with a basketball and a baseball or a wiffle ball bat and play those sports, like we need to continue to reach out and provide access, equipment, transportation to get to rinks. Ice time's expensive. So, on that hockey side, I challenge everybody in the game to really, if we want to grow this sport, reach out to the non-traditional, kids that would even think about playing the sport and bring them in. And as you guys know, if you've played the game for the first time, or if you've been at an NHL game the first time, that's where you get hooked and that's where you play it. And it's the same goes for business. Like how are our businesses going to grow? Let's reach out. Let's be open-minded. And let's truly just have empathy and enjoy helping people.
Love it.
Frank, that's an awesome answer.
So,
we're out of time. We're gonna have to have you back for a part 2 on this because that's another hour discussion right there. But
would love to.
Yeah, we really appreciate you being on today and sharing your wisdom and everything. And this was a phenomenal episode. It's been so great to connect with you.
Well, I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much, and I'm honored you guys had me on. I appreciate it very much.
Frank, you're the best. You're the best, Frank.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Win, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. Remember, you can get all of our episodes wherever podcasts are heard or head over to pivotalmoments.com, pivotalmomentsmedia.com, to find every episode we've ever done. But for Frank Buonomo, JB Spiezzo, I'm Lee Elias. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Win.